I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is watching the TCs that I've hired, the TCs that I have collaborated with, watching them grow and get better and expand their businesses and start their businesses or whatever it is. I love doing that and love seeing them go from making, minimum wage working at some admin job to making close to six figures. I love it.
Another episode here. Welcome to the Headed Home podcast. We hope everyone's doing great. Today is a Friday, so that's nice. Babe, you got big plans for the weekend? Does it involve me?
Does it involve you doing something like running kids to sports events? Then yes.
Okay. You're hiking the Colorado Trail, though.
I am hiking.
Not the whole thing.
No. So yeah, my friend and I are hiking the first segment of the Colorado Trail on Sunday. I'm a little nervous about if my legs are gonna.
Is it gonna be snowy?
I don't know, because it's like the lowest elevation of the Colorado Trail. So it's like right out of Waterton Canyon.
Bring your snowshoes just in case.
So I have to tell you this story because I was so pissed at him. He, like 2 years ago, decided to hike the Colorado Trail, like a segment of it.
Yeah.
With his cousin, and it was like May.
I thought it was like summertime though, right? And by the way, let's do an intro real quick before we get into this. We're hanging out with Amity Krause.
Yay.
Amity, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into your background in a second. I'm really excited to chat with you. It was in June. It was summertime. It was hot out. I had no idea. I thought it was a hike, and it wasn't a 14er, right? It was just a hike on the Colorado Trail. And apparently that is way too early to do a hike.
Like, I'm getting pissed at you thinking about this.
Yeah,
right? So
it was really snowy. We almost died.
But like he wore his like normal tennis shoes, like a tennis shoe that you walk in, and he's like climbing on like the side of this snowy mountain.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And he gets home, and he's like not someone that I would like. You're not fearful of things or like don't get freaked out by doing stuff.
Yeah.
And he came home and was like, I was like near death.
Yeah.
So I am not doing that. I have planned ahead much better than someone else in this room.
Good.
But anyway, don't even get me started.
Okay. Well, I do want to get Amity started on her background because as a lender, we work with a lot of real estate agents who in turn work with a lot of transaction coordinators. And we as lenders work with a lot of transaction coordinators as well, but we don't often get a chance to sit down with them and hear about their day-to-day. So I want to get into that, but tell us, like, how did you get into the real estate industry? What's your background?
Yeah. So I have a varied background. I primarily was in retail, and finally, after about 20-something years of working in retail, I said, no, I'm done. I got to be over it. So I thought it through and was looking for a role, a job, a career where I could have a lot of independence. I wanted to have my own business. I always say this in my head, I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. I don't want to hold anybody accountable. I don't want to be held accountable. And so those were the things that led me into real estate, because even though you do have people that you are accountable to, your clients, your broker, and so on, I felt that there was enough independence there. And I also had an interest in it. So real estate is how I started. And then
you jumped in as a realtor then?
Yeah.
Retail. Okay.
Yeah. I jumped right in as a realtor, and that was in 2018. And I was working for a great little brokerage with great training, and realized within the first year that I did not like selling real estate. I loved going to events and connecting with realtors and lenders and title companies and all of the service providers. But when it came to connecting with clients who wanted to buy or sell a home, I would freeze. It just was not my jam. I struggled with marketing in that way. But what I really loved was all of the details and the contract and the nitty gritty behind the scenes. That really, really excited me. And so I decided, okay, I'm not doing great as a realtor, but I really like this aspect. Let's see how I can incorporate that into what I do. And so that's how I started working transaction coordination and eventually started my own business.
When you started in transaction coordination, when was the place where you were like, I want to change things up a little bit in my business and start leading in that space? Because I think when you got into transaction coordination, first it was like a lot of learning, and you've kind of like transitioned into some different spaces in that work.
Yeah. So 2019 is when I started my company, and for the first year I was really on my own, and that worked out great because it was during the pandemic. So we had a lot of, so that's 2020, 2021. We were seeing huge shifts in the market. Like there was a combination of being very busy and also not busy. Like
yes.
It was the oddest time. Yeah. And it gave me the opportunity during the busy times to see where the needs were, see how I could make where the gaps were in my business. And then I was able to say, okay, I have a minute. I can work on my systems and my processes, and I can build this in so I can keep on going. I can keep scaling, and I can keep growing. And set me up doing that during 2020 specifically. I was able to make my first hire at the end of 2020, and I hired my first virtual assistant, and then a few months later, my first transaction coordinator to work with me. And I really wanted to coach and develop those transaction coordinators that worked with me. And I attracted in the beginning people who came from within the real estate industry, but were not necessarily from real estate specifically. So title companies, both my first two transaction coordinators that I hired came from title companies where they worked as processors or they worked on the back end. So they had the general knowledge and they had the service levels that I was looking for in the business, but there was a lot of opportunity to train and develop them into growing.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's awesome. That must be exciting too, to start a business like that, get some traction, and be able to start making hires and feel that positive momentum. Being a transaction manager, I would assume you have to have a really high level of detail oriented. We were just talking about that before recording. Like I'm very detailed. I love that aspect about my job in a way. Like a lender is, we're coordinating a transaction in a different way, like on the loan side, but like it is hard to find other people in our industry that like pay the same attention to the details. Is it like that with you, or do you think it's more of just if you have the systems and the trainings that you can teach someone who isn't detail oriented to do that job well?
So this is kind of a tricky one. You guys have probably heard of the DISC assessment,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
So this is a big realtor assessment and, placement and job type of placement. One of the C type personality, which
C to a
right?
C to a
yeah.
I always say
Same. This is a very interesting story about that. I'll come back to it. But a C type personality is very conscientious, very, very detailed. And at your absolute core, when you're operating in the role as a transaction coordinator, you do need to be a high C.
Yeah.
You need to be the type of person who's seeing what's coming next. You need to be the person who's resourceful and who can see where we're going and how to prevent things that are going. And C's are the ones that do that, right? Mm-hmm. Where a C may not be as successful as a transaction coordinator, a D is going to be successful in the business-minded, the dominant personality as a business owner. So a transaction coordinator who's a high C may not be a great independent transaction coordinator as a business owner. They're great TC, but they may not be a good business owner. Mm-hmm. Same as with a business owner, you're going to want to be probably a pretty high D in order to be successful, but you might not be the best detail person. And I experienced this because when I first started in real estate, first became the transaction coordinator, I was super high C. My D was almost minuscule. And within the first year of being in the business and having to learn how to run a business as an entrepreneur, I went and shifted my D all the way to being pretty equal with the C. So I actually straddle both lines, and that is not normal.
That's very rare.
Yeah.
So right now, like you're a high C, high D.
Yes.
Yeah. You're like a high C, like kind of a high D.
I think it's like I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't taken one in a while. I feel like it fluctuates. I know when I first took it, it was like very high C, and then I think D was next in line.
And then I like an I, and then some S in me. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah,
just got
just
whole
no.
Yeah,
which is why we make a good team.
Yeah,
because you don't see the details.
Yes.
She sees
big
picture, which helps.
I
us
can
a lot.
like the big picture is so easy for me, and then I'm like, yeah, you go figure out how to get there. But
but it always just frustrates me because she'll feel like you have like all these grand ideas, and I'm like, wait, like I just have to see that first step. Tell me about a day in the life of a transaction coordinator. Like, what does a normal day look like for you?
Well, so for a transaction coordinator, like if you're working as a transaction coordinator, I think the most important thing is having a routine.
Yeah.
It's a very, very routine type of position. Now, that doesn't mean that you are, that you have to hardcore time block. I think that is really in a role where your job is so dependent on what's happening with the contract and a variety of activities that have to happen. I think it's very difficult to say, okay, from 8 to 10, all I'm going to do is sit in my email inbox. And from 10 to 12, I'm going to just check off this box is related only to appraisals, or whatever it is. I don't think that's realistic. So what I suggest in organizing it is that you have sort of a startup time period that you're getting into your day. So you get into your email inbox when you walk into your office. What do I got going on? I batch that. I personally love the zero inbox method. So
us too.
Yeah.
It's rare,
I love you guys.
No.
But I love it because I can go through, okay, I'm sorting everything and I know what do I need to work on right this second? What can I work on later? What am I going to, what's going to be just interesting political articles that I'm going to look at later when I have personal time or whatever it is. So I suggest sorting your inbox first. Then I go in, then I suggest getting into your checklist, work through your checklist the best that you can, start sending those things out, and then go back to your inbox. And so you're not just constantly paying attention to your inbox. You do have specific times where you can focus and use that, maybe you pull in Pomodoro method or whatever, where you're just working for focus periods and then going back. So I think the hardest thing for especially these kind of roles where it's admin focused, is that you're expected to have, you want to be responsive. You think that in order to be responsive, you constantly have to have one eyeball on your inbox.
Yes.
You don't have, you can still be responsive and not let your inbox rule your life. That I lived that way the first year that I was a TC and I was on my own and I almost burnt out. I almost lost my mind. So now having a little bit of break in between where I don't go on my inbox makes a big difference.
Well, I don't think people realize how much energy your brain uses up when you're constantly switching back and forth in activities. Like and so it does matter. And, in particular, when you're in a reactive industry, which like you are, you still have to be thoughtful in how you can work from a place of being proactive within that, right? Or otherwise everything takes longer. You're burning more energy because your brain is like, what am I focusing on right now? Like that transitional period takes a long time.
And you're saying like short term though, right? Like if you're like, hey, I'm going to head into my day and I'm just going to like sit on my email and answer.
And just
like,
stop what you're doing
right.
the second that you see something
and it's
come
inefficient too.
No, totally.
But what you're saying, what method did you mention before?
The Pomodoro method.
Tell me about
So Pomodoro method is basically you work for a 20-minute segment.
Yeah.
I'll focus in on one specific task and then you take a 5-minute break. Okay. And then you go back to a different task. It's just breaking it into chunks.
I like that too.
Sounds like a spaghetti.
I know.
Delicious.
I'm very hungry right now.
I like that though because and that's a good little pointer. When we do the time blocking or if trained on that, it's put everything on do not disturb. Do it if it's a very important task, whether it takes 20 minutes or an hour. do that and then open up, do the communication, and then, but you have to be able to prioritize early in the day to know what that next priority is going to be anyway.
So, and a good understanding of how much time you have and like what that looks like. Like, I feel like the more that you get into life, you just like start learning what like actual amounts of time mean in work,
Yes.
you know, because, and, you know, and we always joke about that because, you know, Andrew will tell me all the time, he's like, you have an unrealistic expectation of yourself of how many things you're going to get done in a day. Right. But like, I think that as you time block and find ways in which like you can minimize some of those things, like batching your time or at similar activities or whatever, like it is, you really start to have a better understanding of what that looks like and how you can use, you know. I would assume that as a TC, you would have to occasionally be put in positions where you have to have difficult conversations with people. So talk to me about how did you like build that muscle as you were, which I'm sure you probably had difficult conversations in retail all the time too, but like talk to me about kind of like that learning that's happened for you.
So I think there's a couple of different types of difficult conversations that we have as a transaction coordinator. Most of the time, those are not going to be with the buyer or the seller.
Mm-hmm.
They're most of the time they're not going to be even with the lender or the title company. The hard conversations are going to come with your agent who has hired you, and they're going to be with another TC maybe that works for you, right?
Yeah.
So those are the two most common types of difficult conversations that I have. I'm lucky in that I came from leadership in retail. I've had a lot of training on how to have hard conversations. And the first thing that I always try and think about, no matter who I'm having the hard conversation with, is number one, this isn't personal. And number two, nobody's trying to suck at their job. Who goes to work and says, today I'm going to suck at my job. I'm going to screw everything up and because I hate everybody. No one does that. So I've heard a lot in my career, feedback is a gift. And I do believe that is true because you can take that information, you can learn from it. But I have one thing that one of my coaches said to me is feedback is clear. Being clear is kind.
Yes.
Being clear is kind. We're always worried to have conversations because we think that we're going to come off as a jerk. You can come from a place of curiosity. You can ask a lot of questions. You don't have to judge the answer. Just try and understand what people are going through. Help me understand why you prioritize this task over this. Come from a place of understanding.
I love clear is kind. I think, you know, one thing that we talk about a lot around giving feedback is, even with our own children, is like as much as you can front load expectations on the front end, that allows you to have an easier conversation with feedback on the back end. So, and there's what's that book? You say anything. How to say anything to anyone. Gosh, I can't remember her name.
She's a great author, speaker, but yeah, part of that, it was, I think feedback is kind is great. I don't think that came from that book, but I do remember, you know, up front it was, hey, when you're having a conversation with a member of your team, you ask them what their goal is in their position, and then you tell them, okay, great, it's my job to help you achieve that goal. And if I see something that you're doing that's standing in the way of you achieving that, I'm going to give you feedback, whether it's good or bad.
Because I care about you and I want you to like move forward with that goal.
Right.
Yeah. It's Shari Hartley.
Okay.
Yeah.
I completely butchered her idea, but like check that book out if you're a leader. It's great. Or just if you want to be in a positive relationship with anyone, I think setting expectations is
like I set expectations with you all the time.
The attempt is there.
Yeah, it's best effort.
Well, and sometimes things come up that you're not able to, you know, foresee, you know, and then the feedback has to come, even if an expectation wasn't set. But that's challenging, especially when you said with realtors and they're counting on you to make sure that deadline doesn't get missed because there's 10,000 or 50,000 earnest money on the table, you know, and so is their reputation too. So that's a big trust that they're putting in you and your team.
Right. Yeah, communication between the realtor and their TC is so, so important. And I experience a wide variety of types of communication. I have agents who are really great communicators, and we're on the phone and texting and on Slack or whatever method several times a day, every single day. And then I have agents that I don't hear from at all. I'm like, oh, I've been looking for this document. Look at what it's been in here for a week, and you didn't tell me you popped it in. Thanks. But it's my bad.
I can understand that.
I want to talk about the benefit to agents of having a transaction coordinator.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit, hands down, comes to leverage. And it's more than just being able to spend your time, have more free time as an agent or having time to spend time with your family. It is, you gain so much from having a TC. If you have a TC that you really, really trust, you have a great relationship with, that TC is on it as far as they've got good systems, they know what they're doing, you really can rely on that person to manage the transaction entirely and then step in when you need to do something that's maybe restricted because of licensing law in your state. Like you can't, a TC can't do contract negotiations. Right. Many cases they can't put together amendments or anything to the contract without having approval by their agent. Mm-hmm. If you only have to step in to do those things, that gives you a lot of time back so that you can really work on getting your next contract, getting your marketing solid, doing your TikToks, or developing relationships with clients, with other realtors, with business members. That is the biggest advantage for an experienced agent. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that when you think about a professional transaction coordinator and the number of contracts that they're actually seeing come across their desk in comparison to what an agent is seeing. Now, the agent is seeing a lot of contracts, but most agents are doing maybe 10 contracts a year. Like, that's a pretty decent amount, right,
Yep.
for a buyer agent. The TC is probably seeing closer to 100. If they're independent and they're running a business, they better hope that they're doing closer to 100, and if they're going to get close to making a livable wage, right? So they're seeing a lot of different things, and that has knowledge. Where if you're you're an agent and you come across a situation you've never seen before, and the TC can say, "Hey, I actually saw this on one of my other clients' files. This is how we got through it." That's valuable.
Good point. That's very valuable.
It is.
Another thing that just popped into my mind when you were explaining the benefits too was, in real estate, in this business, like, it's so important that the buyer and the seller has a positive experience if they're going to come back to you. And if you're if you're a busy realtor, you might not be able to put in the time and effort to make sure that transaction goes as smooth as possible. So I feel like a transaction coordinator is someone managing like the ins and outs of making sure that all the deadlines are hit and that the buyer's questions are answered. I feel like that also like pumps up that relationship between the realtor and the client.
Absolutely, because you really can you appear to be a real partnership.
Right.
And I don't, even as a TC, I don't know all the answers all the time. And there are some things that are not in my wheelhouse, that there's something that the agent is going to need to answer. But if the agent doesn't have time to answer because they're out at a showing or they're in a meeting or whatever, I'm not going to ignore the client who asks that question. Right. I'm going to jump in and say, "Hey, we're working on that. I'll get right back to you." And then we bought some time, but the client thinks that we're responsive and we're on it.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like saying, "I don't know the answer. I'll find out right away." It's the same kind of thing. That's responsiveness in my mind. You don't have to know the answer all the time. You just have to respond and say, I'm working on it.
Like,
I'll
got
get back
you.
to you.
And that's all they want to know. They just want to know because they're, in their mind, they're getting this question off of their chest, and now they know, okay, they're working on it. They'll get back to us when they have the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We love working with agents that have a transaction manager because it makes the lender's job easier. I'm sure it makes the title rep's job easier as well, but it just makes the transaction go smoother which is a huge benefit to the realtor because that client's going to have a good experience and hopefully come back.
Did you struggle at the beginning, or was it hard to balance or navigate the emotional tidal waves that can sometimes pop up with transactions? Because there's so many things, like, like every transaction, there's like some new weird thing that happens, right? Was that hard at first?
Yeah. It's it's something every TC has to learn it, and they have to go through it. Yeah. You cannot care about it more than anybody else.
Yes.
As operating as a TC, I'm a high C. I'm a rule follower. Compliance. This is what the real estate commission says. This is what your broker says. We have to do it this way. The contract says that this happens. And the truth is that there are some things in certain markets that contractually are a bigger deal than other things, or they're only a big deal if somebody makes a big deal out of it. And as a young TC or a new TC, I would get really wrapped up in some detail that is not something that we're really that worried about in this market. That's the biggest takeaway that I ended up having, is that I can't care about it more than anybody else does. Let them know. Did my job, support them in however they need to be supportive, and then move on. Otherwise, I would cry every night.
How have you? I mean, I think that's a big part. Is like, how have you learned over the years? Have you had any like tools or tips that like have helped you with kind of like balancing those emotions through some hard situations, or do you feel like it's just like practice of continually being in that and just
being
getting
emotionless and being dead inside?
I know, we always joke about like, I
can't feel anything anymore. And I'm sure that's not healthy, but you do have to somehow detach emotionally from the transaction. And that is hard, because then sometimes you find yourself doing that like in the real world, like in situations where you should feel emotions.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that you do have to protect your peace in a way by allowing some death in the inside.
Yeah.
It's so true, but just so like.
But I like what you said, and just disconnect. You can't want it more than someone else.
Yeah. But I also think that there are some things that you can do. For myself, when I would get very stressed out, I had the very busiest time in my career, I was figuring things out. I had a brand new couch, and it's black, and I had 3 white cats. And so I would get mad about something that was going on and irritated about some situation with a contract. And I would go and I would grab my vacuum and I would vacuum the couch, and I would feel better. And that sounds silly, but that 5-minute break, that's what I did. But stepping outside is really good. Eventually, those kind of practices, like not eating at my desk, taking a breaks throughout the day, just so that I'm operating as my best self and not being consumed by my computer. That helped me not become so emotionally attached when stressful situations would come along. Because I was balanced, because I protected my peace in a positive way.
We always talk about how, like, if I go work out in the morning, or if I, like, go outside and get sun in my eyeballs and on my skin, or if I, eat well, or, like, those things, like, do help, like, every day when you're just getting, like, a lot thrown at you every day, right? And you have to continue to do them in order for you to be in a place where you can work in a healthy space in a hard job.
Yeah. I think in the real estate world, we've all heard about having morning routines, and they become a little bit cliched, right? Of what you're going to do. Oh, I work out at the gym at 3:00 in the morning. Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just keep getting
but having, even if it's a small morning ritual or a small routine that you have, just a moment that you do for yourself is going to set you up, and it is going to make some differences in how you perform the rest of the day. And you also will learn you learn different ways to do it. For me, we're here in Colorado, you know, Mountain Time. Most of my agents are Eastern Time. So what time is 8 o'clock? 6 a.m. I am up and I am working at 6 a.m. I love morning routines and I love to journal and I love to do all of these things. Am I going to get up at 4 o'clock to do that? No, ma'am. I am not doing that.
Hells to the no.
Hells to the no. But what I will do is get all my stuff done. Like I'll get my morning section done, and then I have a gym appointment. I go to a boot camp class, and I'll go and do that. And then I start feeling better, and I come back and I'm refreshed and I'm ready to go, and I finish out my day. And that's become the routine. So you don't feel like you have to have a cliched morning routine. Who says your morning routine has to start when you wake up? Maybe the routine is work a little bit, and then you do your self-care, gym, or whatever.
That's what you do. You work a little and then do stuff.
I will.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard you mention this in one of your podcast episodes that I was listening to that I think translates. You were talking about like having some sort of a system for your job, and to me I thought of like a database, but I think you said the best one to get is the one that you'll use.
Yes.
So I think it's the same thing with the morning routine. Like it can be whatever you want it to be as long as it works for you.
Yes.
So, and I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into that podcast so that you can talk a little bit about yours and the type of people that you interview, and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I host the TC Exchange podcast. I started it just over a year ago now, or we're coming up on a year. And it has been really, really fun. At first, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like, and I had a lot of one-on-one, or just me talking podcast episodes, and then I'm like, I'm bored of myself, and I don't want to listen to myself talk. So why would anyone else want to listen to me talk? And like,
we've been there.
We literally had the same conversation.
And I got this idea. What if I did this series that's called Rookie to Pro? Now, so there are a lot of different transaction coordinator focused Facebook groups that are out there. And so we see a certain number of common questions that come up. And I wanted to, with the Rookie to Pro series, I wanted to take one of those questions that seems to happen the most frequently is, how did I get started as a TC? How did I get clients? How did I grow to having a business with all of these TCs that work for me? And I wanted to answer that question. And so I have this series that I go out and I invite people onto my podcast. Usually they've been in business for a year, 2 years, sometimes longer. Some people are growing at an amazing rate. Just talking like, how did you get started? What industry did you come from? Did you start independently? When did you realize that you had to be a business owner and you weren't an admin sitting, hiding in the back? Tell me about your business model and how you landed on that, because there's so many different ways that people can operate. And I wanted to find a way to have that conversation and share it with the community so that new TCs coming into the industry knew what the journey could look like, and then also to help get some exposure for the transaction coordinator business as a whole.
Yeah.
I just what I love about it, and I heard you say that, what has been so fun about this for me is I really just genuinely love learning about humans, and what makes them tick and what things they think about. And I don't know, it's been a cool experience. I feel like it's just a different way to talk to someone than you, things might not normally come up in a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of learned that too.
Totally. And I think what you're doing is good because it's shining a light just on that industry in general. I mean, no one talks about transaction coordinators.
Yeah.
In my sphere, although we work with them, we work with you guys on every transaction almost. Yeah. So I think it's pretty relevant too. And it's a cool career path that a lot of people can get into if they're looking to, get into a new career.
It is. And even within the transaction coordination industry, the TCs that work, a lot of them don't even know that this is a job or this is a career or that they could have their own business. And I remember a few years ago, I had a colleague who worked for another brokerage in out of state. And we were chatting one day, and I said, oh, you need to check out this Facebook group. There's a ton of great resources and blah, blah, blah. And she comes back to me. She's like, Amity, there's all these people that are just like us. Like, yes, there are. There's so many. It's really exciting because even in 2018, when I got into real estate, TCs were in-house working at a brokerage, usually for a team. There were not very many independent ones. And now we're seeing an explosion of independent TCs, and it's super cool to see. It's a great business. I love it.
Is it competitive?
It is and it isn't. I find it to be very collaborative in that the communities are always working together to answer questions and help each other and provide tips. There is, of course, with any industry, there's going to be a little bit of competition and understanding who your client is compared to somebody else's client. We're all very different. There's a ton of realtors out there.
Yeah,
right. There's
a ton.
There really is. The competition comes in how good are you at marketing?
Well, and we talk about this sometimes because you really do have to find the agents that are like you and that you can work like you, right? Yeah. It's really important, I think, when you have a business to be really mindful and thoughtful about what your values are and who you are wanting to attract to do business with. I think sometimes people, when they get in a space where, you might have a scarcity mindset, that kind of gets thrown out the window, but we always come back to it, when we are focused on agents who work like us and, have similar values and it's such a happier place to be in your business when you're working from that space.
It is. I coach my students, my listeners, anybody who listens to me about knowing who your client is and in order to do that, you need to know who you are
100%.
and how you work, how you want to work.
Yeah,
because it is your business, and that's the beauty of owning your own business too. Is you don't have to work with people you don't want to work with.
Yeah.
But in order to decide that, you need to know who you are,
and you have to have a firm. You have to feel really strong in that. I think, because when you're starting out, that can feel really scary to say, that's actually not for me, right? Yeah. But knowing that, I think, is really important. If you had to pick the most important lesson that you've learned in creating your business, and what is the one thing you're most proud of in creating your business, what would those things be?
I think the most important lesson that I learned is that everything is fixable. Is that we, even in legal contracts, everything is fixable, and there's a way to work through it. So if you make a mistake, that is going to be okay. It's going to be okay, and don't hide from the mistake. Identify what happened and fix it going forward. That's been the biggest thing that I have really learned and come to understand. And I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is watching the TCs that I've hired, the TCs that I've collaborated with, watching them grow and get better and expand their businesses and start their businesses or whatever it is. I love doing that and love seeing them go from making, minimum wage working at some admin job to making, close to six figures. I love it. So cool. I'm so proud of that.
There's nothing better than I feel helping humans get better at something, right? It just feels it's fulfilling, right?
Yeah. You're making a positive impact.
Totally.
What type of people are you looking to connect with now?
So I work with a couple of different types of people. I still operate my TC business. We are good on that. But I do work with independent TCs or TCs at brokerages that are wanting to look to grow in their business, to learn how to do their job. I consult with brokerages on how to get their TC businesses, their TC side of their business going, their systems and processes, and that's really what I'm looking to connect with.
Gotcha. So realtors or real estate companies that have TCs that need coaching.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
And where can people find you if they're interested in that?
Yeah, so you can find me at my business website, which is truthnorthtransactionservices.com. You can book a discovery call right there. Or you can also email me at truenorthtransactionservices.com. And you can find me on Instagram at truenorthtct.
Awesome. And
You got a surprise
I do
question
have a
to throw
surprise
out there?
question.
Oh.
Yeah, just you.
Oh, okay.
You
That's
just
usually
worry
your
about your
wrap-up
own question. I know. So
Coffee.
I do have. I know I almost stole your coffee. I was gonna thank you for
You
that.
won't like it.
He puts. Do you ever put like butter in your coffee or any
No,
sort
but
of?
I've heard of people doing it.
It's really good.
This guy.
Tell us, how is it?
Just dumps butter and oil in it. Okay, if you.
Bulletproof.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's kind of
yes,
like that. It's
it
kind of
is
like that, but it's not. It's not that.
It
extreme.
is. This guy, just for context, so you know what type of person he is. He will go from one day from eating an entire box of Girl Scout cookies to deciding that he's going to eat like raw liver for
For a day, that was
breakfast.
disgusting. By the
Yeah.
way, I'll stick with the Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah.
He's
a
a Gemini,
I'm
if
very-
that helps.
Yeah, extreme.
Yeah.
Extreme on each
Well,
side.
I've been on similar kind of paths, like, oh, I'm going on a Whole30 starting next week. Let's eat all the cupcakes this week.
Totally. Whole30's brutal.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, surprise question. So if you had to write a book about something, what would it be about?
Oh,
To be anything.
Anything.
it would probably be some sort of smutty romance.
Oh, I love it.
Go on.
Love it.
I'm not sure our ears can handle
Oh.
That's a good answer.
I love that. Awesome. Well, we're so grateful that we got connected with you and we were able to learn some stuff today. And I just appreciate all of like the things that you shared with us and just kind of like how you got there. It was really cool to hear your experience.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And yes, realtors, check out Amity, transaction coordinators. If you're interested in coaching or learning more, I definitely recommend reaching out, listen to the podcast, check out the content. It's really good stuff, and it's informative. And we know that I can tell that you know what you're talking about because like I've been in lending for 15 years. You've been in lending for 5 or so. And I understand like those little details are so important, and not everybody has that, and we need people like you in the industry. So, check her out, and thank you all for listening so much. We'll see you next time.